start, and Kathleen can go back and watch the beginning, and then the other people are people that may jump in later or something like this. But anyway, I'd like to start with sort of welcoming everybody, and whoops, just a second. But I think the thing I want to do first is to welcome Dave Grady and say thank you so much for coming. And Dave is our township manager, and I think he sort of gets me to the heart of where I'm hoping this might go as a committee, as a group. We in Nether, there are 35 members in Nether, league members in Nether Providence. Now, some of them are working, some of them are, don't do Zoom and a few things like that. But I think what would be really nice if we had sort of a Nether Providence unit type thing, since we're such a large league, nearly 200 members, that, we could be sort of then talk about what's happening in our town and what we want to deal with and this sort of thing. And I know that Ralph Graves, who's here, is somebody who's been working on community issues and bringing people together in other ways. So I sort of thought maybe this would be something that might end up being a quarterly kind of meeting, that we would just get together and talk, and may invite Dave other times, maybe too, or other member commissioners or something like that, to just understand better what our town is, and to give you a little history going back to I'm going to say the early 70s or maybe late 60s. There was something called a Know Your Community, where you literally every 10 years you had to go back and revise it and make sure you understand how your town was governed. And so we're starting off today with I've asked Dave a bunch of questions to say, okay, these are things I think we ought to know about. So I'm sure you're going to have more questions too, and you can put them in chat and we'll get to them at the end. But I think, Dave, we're going to let you get going now. And thank you so much for coming today.
Sure, it's my pleasure to be here. And I know some of you, for those of you who I don't, it's nice to meet you virtually. Hopefully at some point in the near future, we can actually meet in person. Give me a second here while I'm going to try and share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see this presentation here. I'm going to swap the screens real quick. All right, and hopefully everyone can still see the presentation. All right.
Yes.
Great. So again, thank you very much for asking me to join. I was very honored, and I think this was a great opportunity to get to know some more people within the community. Just a little background on myself here. Let me see. All right. Please, is it advancing? There we go. So a little background on me. I became the township manager on July 1st of 2020. So I'm still very new at this. I'm still learning a lot of things. I served as the assistant manager since March of 2015. Before that, I worked under Gary Cummings, who was the manager here for a long time. He started here, I think, in 1978. So I was very lucky to work under Gary. He taught me a lot of information, and he and I became great friends. So while I was excited to take over as township manager, I was sad that he had to be leaving. I think Gary has spoken to the league before, and Gary's a great guy. He's still nearby, and I still pick his brain on occasion for things. So I've been here since 2015. I am a certified public accountant in Pennsylvania. I have my accounting degree. I used to work at Ernst & Young. I worked in the financial services office, so I mostly audited mutual funds and hedge funds. Not a very exciting career, wasn't something I particularly enjoyed. I was looking for something where I could have an impact on the community and get to work with people. And so I kind of found my way into local government. I was lucky to find a position here, and it's been great. I have my master's in public administration from Villanova, along with my certificate of city management. And I actually still I continue to teach in the program at Villanova. I teach financial management at their MPA program, just kind of usually in the evenings, mostly online, some in person. This is my family here. It's my wife, Kate. This is my daughter, Nora. She's about to turn 5. This is my daughter Jane, and this is Claire. In case you couldn't tell, Jane and Claire are identical twins. We had them in October of 2019. So things are a little crazy at home, but it's fun. I told my wife about this opportunity to speak before the league, and she said, your League of Women Voters here at home will be supporting you. So a little background on the role of the township manager. So this was actually created in 1978. So as I mentioned, Gary Cummings served before me. He became township manager in 1983. So I'm actually only the third township manager that Nether Providence has had over this time period. So the manager is appointed by the majority of the commissioners. I'm not an elected official. At any point in time, somebody could say, the commissioners could say, yep, we're done with you. It's time to move on, and they can let me go. Hopefully they won't do that. I like our board a lot and I like being here, but they could certainly do that at any point. So my role is to supervise and be responsible for all the activities of the municipal departments. So that covers, I'll go into our org chart in a little bit, but generally it's our finance, zoning, code enforcement, police department, and public works. Those are kind of the big areas. I help prepare the budget. I usually do that in conjunction with our finance department, our finance director, and the commissioners. Develop long-range plans for the community. And then for any of you that have attended commissioners meetings, that's me helping prepare the agendas and prepare the commissioners for the meetings. So I had a conversation with Olivia a couple weeks ago when she first invited me to join here, and she gave me a number of topics, things that she thought the league should know about. So I'm going to kind of run through these things. Hopefully it'll seem like they're all connected together in some way. But if it seems a little random, I'm just trying to cover a lot of things, and I think we'll have some time at the end for questions. So Nether Providence is a first-class township. I mean that in both senses of the word. We are a first-class township, but we're also recognized as a first-class township by the state. So first-class township is determined by your population density. So you need to have at least 300 inhabitants per square mile. The difference between a first-class township and a second-class township is that you have commissioners versus in a second-class township, you're going to have supervisors. They're both elected officials. They serve similar roles. And that's why it's, a lot of the communities that are first and second-class townships in Delaware County, we all work together because we have same sorts of issues. So there's not really much difference between a first-class township and a second-class township. Each has their own code, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But another difference with first-class townships is that you'll have wards. So Nether Providence here, we have 7 wards. Each of the commissioners serves a 4-year term. You're not going to see wards in a second-class township. Now, that's not to be confused with voting precincts. That's a little bit different, because within the wards, as many of you probably know, you could have 1 or 2 precincts in there. First-class townships can have as many as 15 commissioners. Here in Nether Providence, we only have 7. I think 15 would be a lot to deal with. 7 is a very good number and very doable. In second-class townships, you actually have 3 supervisors, but they can actually vote to increase it to 5. Some communities have done that. Boroughs are kind of like, they're a little bit hard to define. They're almost like a small city, a small town. I'm sure you're very familiar with Swarthmore, Media Borough, some of the other boroughs in Delaware County. One of the main differences with the boroughs is you're going to have a mayor. You don't have a mayor in a first-class township. We have a board president, but the board president is different than a mayor. And there's different types of mayors and governmental setups within boroughs. So for example, you may have a borough that has a strong mayor. In that case, the mayor will oversee the police department. So kind of think Upper Darby or Swarthmore. You also have communities where you could have a weak mayor. The weak mayor is really kind of more of a figurehead. They don't have a lot of decision-making authority. And that really depends on that particular borough, how they're set up. Some communities have a home rule charter. Middletown Township and Upper Darby are 2 communities that are examples of that. Where a home rule charter, you can kind of create your own, it's a very simplified way of saying it, but you kind of create your own rules in a sense, as opposed to here where we have to abide by first-class township code. Dillon's rule, Pennsylvania is a state that falls under Dillon's rule. So under Dillon's rule, basically you can only do things that you're granted the power to do. So if the state doesn't say that you can do it, you can't do it. So that's why the first class, second class township code, borough code, for example, can be a little bit lengthy, but I think it still allows the state some control over what municipalities can do. So first class township codes first enacted in 1931. The last comprehensive update was in 1949. And they're actually beginning the process now to update the first class township code. And I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, they want to modernize the language, reflect case law and current practices. I think modernizing it makes sense. A lot of things have changed since the last update a little over 70 years ago. And the other, the second class township code, the borough codes, they've been updated recently. So, you know, I think it's a change I'm looking forward to, although it might mean some changes for us. But again, I think overall it's going to be a good thing. So Nether Providence has a population estimate of a little under 14,000. We're about 4.6 square miles. Our racial composition is just about 83% white, 8.3% Asian, 5.2% Black, 2.3% Hispanic or Latino. Now, I pulled this information from the U.S. Census Bureau. The median household income is 122,000, which is very good. It's easy to look at Nether Providence and say, wow, that's an amazing median household income. Everybody must be doing very well there. And while it is true, there's a lot of people doing very well in Nether Providence. It's not to say that everybody is. We certainly have areas of the community that are more well off than others. You know, so we try to make sure that we focus on all areas of the community. I should say the board does. Per capita income is 57,000. As many of you probably know, we do have 7 wards within the township. Gary liked to tell me the story of I forget how many years ago it was, but it was back the township only had 6 wards, which had never become a problem until you had a split board. So I think you had 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and then they couldn't agree on who was going to become board president. So it was a 3-3 vote. And so that's what prompted the change to 7 wards to make it an odd number, so they wouldn't get into these voting gridlocks for things like that. Nether Providence has 9 parks that include Smedley Park. Smedley is a county park. So sometimes people will call us up and say, hey, can we reserve Smedley Park? Say, yeah, sure you can, but you got to call the county to do it. So while Smedley Park is within Nether Providence, it's not under our purview. So this is our organization chart. We have 7 elected commissioners. So those are basically my 7 bosses. Then it's me, and then we have our police chief, our public works director, our finance director, code enforcement officer, our zoning officer, and then 2 administrative assistants. Under our police department, we have 4 sergeants, and then under them, we have 11 patrol officers. So actually that number should be updated. We now have 16 full-time officers. Now we have 6 crossing guards, and then we have an administrative assistant. In our public works department, so these are the crew members that you see driving around in the big trucks, doing the plowing and working on the roads and parks. We have 7 full-time laborers, and then we have 3 part-time. That can change. They're usually seasonal. We tend to pick up more during leaf season, and then also leaf season, Christmas tree collection, and then in the spring as we're starting to get back into parks. We have our finance director, our assistant finance director. And so overall, we have 35 full-time employees, and then we have a number of part-time employees that does not include our summer camp. When summer camp is in full swing, we have about 30 full part-time employees that serve the summer camp, and then a number of volunteers. The 2020 summer camp is still up in the air. We're trying to find a way to make it happen, but we're still trying to figure out exactly how that could happen. So some of the types of revenues we have are real estate taxes. That's the big one. I think that's the one you're probably most familiar with, especially because you probably just received your bills. Real estate taxes make up about 65% of the revenue that the township brings in. The real estate transfer tax is another portion, a bigger portion of our income. The real estate transfer tax is any time a house is sold, the township collects a half percentage point on that, and it gets split with the school. We have our local services tax, so that's $52 a person for anybody working within the township. So whether or not you're a resident in the township, if you're just simply working in Nether Providence, you will pay that $52 local services tax. There's a per capita tax, which is collected by the school district, but $5 of that does come to the township, and that's on any person that's 18 years or older. There are recycling fees, or sewer fees, cable franchise fees. The cable franchise fees, they come from Comcast and Verizon. So the township allows Comcast and Verizon to use the right-of-way within the community, within the roadway usually. And in exchange for that, they provide a percentage of the revenue that they receive for each quarter. So that can be a sizable amount of revenue for the township. It can be just about $300,000. We have our summer camp fees, and then we have grant revenue. Grant revenue changes throughout the years based on the projects that we're doing, and I'll talk a little bit about our projects coming up shortly. We have our permit fees. So permit fees are going to be for any time you're if you're doing work on your home, any kind of structural work, plumbing work, electrical. Those are the types of things that you'll need to pull a permit for. Oftentimes it'll be your contractor. If they're doing the work, they'll pull those permits. And then fines. Fines are going to be for speeding, parking tickets, any violations of zoning where you've been cited. Our fines are not a large portion of our revenue. In fact, they're a very small portion of our revenue. Anytime someone says, oh, they're just giving us a speeding ticket because the township is trying to collect more revenue, we actually don't keep a lot of that revenue. About half of that ends up going to the county. Another portion goes to, I think, the state, and then we get a portion of it. So, saying $100 ticket, we might get $20 out of it. So it's really not a sizable source of revenue. So, we try to remind people that, our police don't set up speed traps to pick up extra revenue. They set up speed traps to get people to slow down and be safer in the area. Our expenses, so the big ones are going to be for salaries. Salaries and benefits for our police, our public works, our crossing guards, our administrative employees. We have contributions to what we call our funded organizations. So the fire companies, Garden City Fire Company and South Media Fire Company, even though they are considered the Nether Providence fire companies, we do insure them, we provide funding for them. They are separate 501c3 nonprofits. So they have their own board, they make their own decisions. We just provide some additional funding to them and insure them both for their equipment and for their the volunteers. Our other funded organizations are the library. We provide, the Helen Kate Furness Library is separate from the township, but we do provide funding for them. Otherwise, they provide their own insurance. They're a separate organization. Same thing with the Nether Providence Athletic Associations. So that's going to be soccer, baseball, wrestling, basketball, lacrosse. They're all separate organizations, but we do provide funding to them. We provide funding to the Leaper House. The township does own the Leaper House. We have someone in the community, Angela Hewitt, who spends a lot of time keeping up the Leaper House and managing it and, non-COVID hosting the events for it. So Angela Hewitt has done a great job for the Leaper House. I hope some of you have had a chance to meet her at some point. Our building code inspection costs. So as I mentioned, when you're doing work on your house or business, whatever it might be, when you apply for a permit to have the work done, we have a third-party inspection agency. It's Lynn Architects. Lynn Architects is based in Upper Providence. They will come in, they'll do the inspections for us. These are certified code officials, and they service a lot of the communities in the area, including Upper Providence. I think they do Swarthmore. They know what they're doing, and that's why we rely on them for our building inspections. And of course, we have to pay them for those costs. There's road maintenance costs. So every year we do a certain amount of resurfacing of the roads. There's pothole repair, curb repair, lots of work that goes on within the roads. Engineering, we have a third-party engineer. His name is Charles Catania. Catania Engineering is based close by, and they've been servicing the township for a long time. They do lots of work as our engineer, so we pay them a lot. And so the work that they will do is, they're reviewing the road resurfacing program, a lot of our stormwater and flooding projects. Anytime there is, usually for grant projects, they're doing the designs and things like that. So they do a wide variety of work, so that they're a very critical part of the operations of Nether Providence. Recycling disposal costs, sewage treatment, summer camp. I think a lot of these things are self-explanatory. Park maintenance, equipment. So those are the main types of expenses that we have. Not the only ones, of course, but. So how does the township interact with the county? That was another question that Olivia brought to me. So this year, we've had a lot of dealings with the county, especially with regards to the, I call it the health department. The county doesn't technically have a health department yet. They've been working with the Chester County Health Department, but they're beginning to form a health department. But we've been receiving a lot of information from the county in terms of the COVID testing, COVID vaccination distribution, and then just general information about COVID. We used to work with them before as the county intercommunity health department, and it was a lot less. We kind of dealt with them in terms of like mosquito spraying. Anytime you might have a weird random health issue that would come up, we would go to them. But certainly, I think now the health department is being formed at the county. This is something that we're looking forward to. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for the township to work with this soon to be formed county health department. The county also provides some liquid fuels funding to us. They provide about $19,000 a year. So liquid fuels funding is anytime that you go to the gas pump, there's a tax. That tax goes to the state. And the state then funnels that money down through the county, and they'll also funnel it directly to the township. So the township receives an allotment that comes directly from the state, and it'll be a little over $300,000. That's what we're expecting for 2021. And then they also give an allotment to the county, who then distributes that to the municipalities. So we do receive a portion of liquid fuels from the county, and we work with them as we're doing our road resurfacing projects, because the liquid fuels funding is meant to pay for things like road resurfacing. The Bureau of Assessment is another county department that we've been working with a lot over the past year. I'm sure all of you are well aware that that the reassessment just happened. So we've been getting information from the county as the reassessment has been happening. That's information that we're, of course, sharing with our tax collector and the company that's preparing our tax bills. Because we do rely on the assessments of the county, as does the school district. Both the township and the school district rely on the assessments that the county does, and then of course the county relies on that as well. We rely on the county for real estate information. So anytime a property is sold, for example, and the deed is transferred to a new homeowner, that information then gets shared with the township. Similarly, anytime work is done on your property, so you put a big addition on your house, this is something that's going to increase your assessment. So this real estate information gets shared from the township with the county. So you'll see that your assessment will go up a little bit if you've made sizable improvements to your property. The Bureau of Elections is another department that we work with. They just recently had to provide information to them about which commissioners are going to be running for which commissioner seats, I should say, are up for election this year. We have a number of seats coming up. We've got 2, 4, and let me see. We've got 2, 4, and 6 up, but then we're also going to have seats wards 5 and 7 as well, because they've been serving shortened terms. So this is information that gets shared with the Bureau of Election. The county planning department, we work with them for certain projects. They're of course looking for things like walkability, improving safety in the community, transit connections, but they also provide grants to us. So for example, the community development block grant. The community development block grant only serves, only one area of the township is eligible for the, we call it the CDBG program, and that's down in the Garden City area. So the county administers those grant programs, and they also administer some open space grants. They've given us some money for Furness Park, which has recently been developed, and then some improvements that we're looking to make on the Leaper-Smedley Trail in the next year or so. The County Planning Commission is separate, but they work with the County Planning Department. The County Planning Commission reviews subdivisions or any changes to zoning. So any kind of development that's happening in the community will go before the County Planning Commission. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. We have the County Conservation District, which oversees development that's happening, and they're looking at it from the perspective of stormwater management. making sure that there's not sediment getting into the storm drains that could adversely affect the stream. So that's something our conservation district, as well as our township engineer, will be keeping an eye on as development is happening. So for example, you've probably noticed the development that's happening on Wallingford Avenue right now. That's something that the conservation district and our township engineer are keeping a close eye on. The county emergency services is another very important department. We receive information for them every time a big storm is rolling into the area. We get updates from them. They get updates from Mount Holly, the National Weather Service. And we also work with them if there's something that requires funding reimbursement for a large storm event. So sometimes the county will receive funding from FEMA or PEMA, so the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, and that funding will come through the county emergency services. It can sometimes come out to communities. It doesn't happen very often. I think last time it happened might have been a large disruptive thunderstorm that happened in 2016. So it's not something we count on, but every so often it happens. And then certainly we work with emergency services for continuity planning, the emergency services department. So for example, they have all the plans on hand if say like the Springton Lake Dam failed. That's something that have an impact on Nether Providence Township. So we have those plans on file, and we work with the county to update those plans. And then lastly, and this isn't a comprehensive list of all of the county offices that the township works with, but these are some of the more common ones we work with. The UCC Board of Appeals, so that's the Uniform Construction Code. So if you're looking to do work in the township and our code official says, no, you can't do that, that's not in compliance with the code, the builder, the homeowner, whoever it may be, could appeal that with the UCC, and that's done at the county level. In my time here, I actually haven't seen it happen. It's very rare. I don't know how many appeals the UCC board hears each year, but based on Nether Providence, I would think it's not too many, but I don't know that for sure. And then we have interactions with the state. So obviously we work with PennDOT a lot because PennDOT is, we have a lot of state roads in the township. So working with them in terms of, making sure that the roads are cleared. If there's damage in the road somewhere, we're going to alert PennDOT of that. And so there's certain things we work with PennDOT on since so many of their roads do come through Nether Providence. I mentioned the liquid fuel funding, so that's another thing that we'll interact with the state for. We receive funding assistance from the state for our pensions. So that's our Act 205 funding that comes in, and it's based on a number of factors, including population, number of employees that we have. Our pension obligations can be sizable each year. We have about $600,000 to $700,000 a year in pension obligations. It's called our minimum municipal obligation. It's something that our actuaries determine, and we have to put a certain amount of funding into our pension funds to make sure that they are well funded. We're not 100% funded, but we're doing very well. We're in about the high 80s, which, as far as pension funds go, that's doing very well. And that's a good thing, and I think our Board of Commissioners has done a very good job at making sure that funding is being increased. So we also receive fire relief funding. By the way, I see some questions coming in, and that's great. I'm thinking maybe I'll address those a little bit at the end, but please keep the questions coming. I'd like to see them. I just want to make sure I get through all the information first. So our fire relief funding. So this fire relief is funding that we receive from the state, and then we pass directly to our fire companies, and we split them up evenly. It's usually we'll get about $90,000 a year from the state. That's what we've gotten the past couple of years. So that, 40, I think we received $92,000 last year. So the 45 and change, 46 and change, we give right to our fire companies. And then of course we receive various grants from the state. The state likes to fund things that are, things like sidewalks, transit connectivity, trails, environmental improvements, There's not a lot of grants out there for things like equipment. You know, someone says like, oh, you know, we need to purchase a new public works vehicle, snowplow. Is that something we can get grant funding for? Not really. The state is really trying. They provide grants for things that are kind of have positive externalities. They're going to have, you know, long-term benefits, you know, for health and the environment of the community overall. I didn't mention our interactions with the federal government because it is actually very limited. We don't have many interactions with the federal government. You know, this year it's been, or this past year I should say, was mostly the Census Bureau. But with the exception of that, it is kind of limited, the interactions that we have with the federal government. Of course, we pay our federal income taxes, and that's about it. So COVID-19. COVID-19 has produced a lot of challenges for everybody everywhere. And but overall, I think the township has weathered it pretty well. So from a financial perspective, we've had increased costs for sanitizing equipment, parks, sanitizing our facilities here. Our rental inspection revenue is down because we haven't been doing rental inspections. And then home sales slowed down a little bit. So we had lower real estate transfer taxes. So from a financial perspective, those were kind of the big things with COVID. Otherwise, we've been okay. Communities that rely on an earned income tax, we're not a community that does. Communities that did have an earned income tax, they're the ones that really struggled during COVID-19 as people were being laid off, businesses were shutting down, they weren't bringing the same kind of revenue. So those are the ones that really struggled in COVID. So I think, you know, in that sense, we're lucky that we didn't have an earned income tax here because it meant our operations could kind of continue as normal. From a non-financial perspective, our meetings have changed. Everything is virtual. If it weren't for COVID, I'd probably be standing in front of you right now doing this presentation, I think. And so we've been doing virtual meetings for our Board of Commissioners and our various committees for safe, you know, just to keep everyone safe. Our township offices are open. We reopened back in beginning of June. We have a lot of social distancing policies in place. Everybody here, we have different office spaces and working spaces. We're not working shoulder to shoulder. Anytime we're up and away from our desks, we're wearing masks. We're making sure about sanitizing all of the equipment that we're frequently touching. And then we're trying not to work face-to-face with the public. If we're seeing the public, we're going out to people's homes. And we're talking to them outside. And then anybody that's coming into the township building, we do have a window that we're working behind. So that's how we're trying to keep our employees and the public safe, but still maintain our operations here at the township. All right, next. Grants and sidewalks. So as I mentioned before, the grant opportunities, many of our grant opportunities have come from the state, but there are some from the county and federal government. Some of the projects that we've done just recently is up at Grady Park, aka the Summit School. We demolished the building there, so now it's an open space. You might ask what's going to happen long term there at Grady Park. We're not sure yet. You know, there've been a lot of talks about a community center there. I think that's something people would love to have, but a community center would be certainly very expensive. So right now, I think that's kind of just pie in the sky talk. Maybe a couple years down the road, if we can find the funding, something like that might happen. But right now, in the short term, we're going to be doing some smaller improvements there that are going to include a playground, walking trail, and then just kind of leaving it as open space and maybe trying to create some more fields there. We've done a lot of sidewalks in the area. We've Wallingford Avenue, Copples Lane, Moore Road are some of the ones that we've recently completed. We're getting ready to do one on East Possum Hollow Road that will go from Providence Road down to the train station. East Rose Valley Road, which will connect Providence Road down to the trail at Osborne, which connects into the Leaper Smedley Trail. We've been doing park rehabilitation. So Bowens Lane Park was rehabbed just a few years ago. Sapovitz Park is we're in the design phase for that. So we'll be doing a little bit of work up at Sapovitz. And then I just mentioned some of the things that we're doing up at Grady Park. Another important thing is water quality improvements. Some of this is because, you know, we want to help out the environment and we want to improve water quality in the area. And some of that is because of requirements from the state. So fortunately, we've been able to get some state grant funding to make these water quality improvements. And when we talk about water quality improvements, it's things such as stream bank restoration. We're getting ready to do some behind Gooley Park in that stream there. And when we do stream bank restoration, the goal is to reduce the sediment that's coming from the sides of the streams, the stream banks, and getting into the stream and then traveling down into the river, so down through the stream. So when you look at Ridley Creek or Crum Creek, it can look a little bit brown and muddy, and sometimes you even see that sediment floating in there. So we actually have a tonnage requirement, the amount of sediment that we have to reduce from the streams over the next 5 years. So we're starting to accumulate funding and plan for projects that we can do that to meet those requirements. Ordinances. So you've probably heard of ordinances before. And some of you may be familiar with it. For those of you who are not, ordinance is a law of the municipality. So once an ordinance is in place, if you're doing something that is in violation of the ordinance, you can be cited for that. That's something you'd have to pay a fine on. So ordinances are adopted by the Board of Commissioners. They must be advertised. So usually advertised at least a week in advance of the meeting where the Board of Commissioners will vote on it. And then once it is adopted, it becomes part of the township code. Our township code, we have a big book here. It's literally about this thick. It's a big book. It's a great weapon if you need to throw something large and heavy at somebody. But generally, if I'm going to be looking at the code, I'm going to look at it through the ecode360.com. And then, of course, we also have it available on our website. And I think it's very handy there because you can do an easy keyword search. So if you want to know what the noise requirements are in a certain area, you can just search noise, and that will bring you to the code that is dealing with the noise ordinance. Zoning. So our zoning is a part of our code, meaning it is law. So zoning is the regulation of land use, and it's going to cover a number of topics. It's usually residential, office, industrial, and commercial. The zoning is created to ensure the intelligent development of land and making sure that everybody is happy, just to kind of put it very simply. It regulates housing density. It's meant to impact traffic, stormwater runoff, school capacity. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of purposes for zoning. We have 10 residential zoning districts, and about 90% of the township is zoned residential. I do have what did I do with it? Here's our zoning map. So this is probably a little bit hard to see here, but just to kind of give you a general flavor of it, the yellow and the red, the orange, blue, that's all residential zoning. The orange, which you'll see kind of up in this area here, hopefully you can see my cursor there, the C there. These are our limited commercial areas. So as you can imagine, most of the revenue that we receive from the real estate is going to be related to residential, and in communities that have a lot more commercial development. I take, for example, Newtown Township. Their taxes are a little bit lower there because you've got a lot more commercial zoned areas that has a lot higher value than just a residentially zoned area. So that's why when you look at different communities, you see different millages for your tax millages, your tax rate, basically. You're going to see those. You're going to see different millages, and that's largely because of the compositions of the community, of the zoning there. So what happens during development of a property? So anytime you've got an area of land that somebody wants to develop on, maybe it's something that's already existing and they want to demolish some homes and subdivide, or maybe it's an area that's just kind of remained as an open space and an unofficial open space. So for example, the development on Wallingford Avenue. Those plans first come in, they're looked at by our zoning officer. Our zoning officer is going to look at it and make sure that the plans comply with our zoning. If it doesn't, she'll kick it right back. Otherwise, it'll go to the Township Planning Commission, which is purely advisory, and they will look at it. They look at it from the perspective of zoning, but then also just in terms of good community planning. They might look at something that might comply with zoning, but they might have other concerns that, say increased density, or maybe not dense enough, or the impact to traffic or stormwater management. Those are all things that the Planning Commission will look at. The Delaware County Planning Commission will also look at it. They are also advisory. Our township engineer is going to look at it mainly from a stormwater management perspective. Our Shade Tree Commission will look at it. Lisa, you're well aware, and you've helped us out in those areas. They're also advisory. And so when I say they're advisory, each of these committees or commissions provides information that they will share with the Board of Commissioners. And then ultimately it comes to the Board of Commissioners to grant or deny an approval. It can be hard to deny an approval if they are complying with all the requirements of zoning. So sometimes people say, you can't let that development happen. It should remain as open space. While the board may agree with that, they can't just deny development that has a right to develop because it is still somebody's property. And if they're complying with the zoning, they're okay. And if you unjustifiably deny it, the township could be opening itself up to a lawsuit. It's happened. It's happened here before. It's been a long time since it's happened, but it's happened in other communities. So anyway, that's why sometimes people say, oh, the commissioners shouldn't have let that happen. Sometimes they really don't have much choice, and that's why a development will proceed sometimes against people's wishes. So the zoning hearing board, hears variance and special exception requests. So for example, if you're looking to do an addition on your property and the addition that you want to do on your property doesn't comply with the zoning, say maybe it's too close to your neighbor's property line, or you've got too much building coverage on your property, but you say, I need this for whatever reason it might be, you can go before the zoning hearing board and make your case. It's not an easy thing to do. Just simply applying to the zoning hearing board to give your case doesn't mean that they're just right away going to grant that. They're going to give you a hard time about it because zoning exists for a reason. You certainly don't want a community to be any denser than the zoning allows. So if they're asking for a variance or a special exception, that's something that the zoning hearing board really has to hear why your particular hardship is unique and why they will grant it to you. And our zoning hearing board is quasi-judicial. They're completely separate from our Board of Commissioners. Our Board of Commissioners may come in and say, hey, we're opposed to this. The zoning hearing board could say, okay, that's great, but we disagree. We're going to allow it to happen. That can happen. And then if the zoning hearing board, when they make their ruling on a case, if somebody wants to challenge it, they don't challenge it with our Board of Commissioners. They can't. It has to be challenged at a higher level. So oftentimes it'll be at the county level, but you could go right up to the state level. So every so often, if a zoning variance is denied, that's what happens. This is our zoning map that I showed you before. I mentioned our Township Planning Commission. So their main role, as I mentioned, is to review subdivision and land development plans. And they do it in conjunction with the PA Municipal Planning Code. And they're going to make recommendations based on the PA Municipal Planning Code. So they look at that, and then they also review our multi-municipal comprehensive plan. Plan that we're looking to update very soon because our most recent comprehensive plan was from 2006. And that was done with Swarthmore, Rose Valley, and Rutledge, so everybody within the school district. So it's something the township is looking to do pretty soon. We were actually getting ready to do it right before COVID hit, and that kind of put the brakes on it. So, and we'll see if we're going to do it, with all of the other communities or just do it as the township individually. So recycling and trash, that was something Livia also mentioned. So recycling, as you probably know the township handles it, but you may not know the exact mechanics of it. So our recycling is bid out, and it's usually for a period of time, 1 to 2 years, sometimes a little bit longer. Recycling only services our residential areas. So anywhere that's an HOA or a commercially zoned area, a professional office district, they have their own recycling setup that is outside of the township. Our current hauler is B&L Disposal, so they're the trucks that drive around and actually collect the recycling, and then it's taken to Republic's facility in King of Prussia, and they're the ones actually processing our recycling. Recycling is something that our Environmental Advisory Committee has spent a lot of time looking at. Just recently, they did an audit of the recycling. So on one day, the B&L came in and they collected all the recycling. They took it up to Republic, and the Republic, they actually did exactly this. They dumped it on the ground and they kind of picked through it by hand. So our EAC was there to witness it and kind of see the types of recycling that people are doing. How are people recycling well, and how are they recycling poorly? So for example, things like pizza boxes. You might think, okay, pizza box, it's cardboard. Well, actually, that can't be recycled because it's got pizza grease on it. That can contaminate the load. So that's one of the things our EAC is trying to do, and Paul is an ad hoc member on our EAC, so he's been involved with that as well. So it's been very interesting for me learning about recycling over the past couple of years and recycling practices. And trash, of course, is private. You probably all have contracted with, if you're a homeowner, you've contracted with your trash company. The township commissioners have considered making it public before. It's something that came up last year. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't think our board knows what's going to happen with that. In all honesty, it's kind of the political third rail of Nether Providence. People have strong opinions on it, one way or the other. So we'll see where that goes over the next couple of years. Sanitary sewers. Sanitary sewers are owned by the township. They travel to the Central Delaware County Authority, CDCA, or the Delaware County Regional Authority, DELCORA, for treatment. The sewer mains are owned by the township, but the laterals, so the sewer lateral is the piping that runs from your house to the sewer main. Those are privately owned. So if you have a sewer backup, we don't have many of these in the township, but every so often it does happen. When a sewer backup happens, by the way, if it ever does happen to you, and God forbid that it does, but no matter what time of day it is, if it's during business hours, you can call the township here Monday through Friday. But if it's after hours, if it's in the evening or weekends, you can call 911. People want to say, oh my gosh, that sounds crazy. No, we want you to do it. Call 911 because it's a sewage issue, and our public works department will get dispatched right away. Oftentimes when they get dispatched out for those types of things, the backups are an issue in the sewer lateral. On the private section, you know, somebody has something in there they've flushed down there that they should not have flushed. We never want you to flush wipes down the drains, any other sorts of products, food, materials, things like that. The weirdest thing that's ever been found in a sewer main was a bowling ball. These types of things should not be in the sewer mains or the sewer laterals for that matter, because they can create sewer backups. So that's why it's important to really just be mindful and careful about what you're flushing down the toilets. Storm sewers. So our storm sewers are, of course, separate from our sanitary sewers. Not all communities are that way. So there are very few communities that still have a shared system where the storm sewer is getting treated. Ours is not. So we have an MS4 program, which is called the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So our storm sewers go directly into the streams. And that's why it's important that you're not pouring things like oil, paint, gas. Really, the only thing that should be going into the storm drains is water that's coming from the storm themselves. Because anything else that's going right into the streams, that becomes your drinking water eventually. And then of course you've got fish life that can be killed by things like paint, oil. None of that stuff should ever go down in any sort of drain. Don't put it down the storm sewers, and don't put it down the sanitary sewers either. Couple more slides here, getting towards the end. So state, local, private roads. Major roads are generally state roads. So the ones that we have are Baltimore Pike, Providence Road, Chester Road, Wallingford Avenue, Brookhaven, Beatty, Waterville, and Rose Valley. Other roads are township roads. I think I missed a state road or two in there. I have to check that, but generally those are the big ones. All other roads are going to be township roads. So the township roads are the roads that the township plows, and they're the ones that we maintain. Anytime there's potholes or resurfacing that happens, we're just doing the township roads. And then we have about a dozen private roads. Private roads we don't have anything to do with. It's kind of similar to a driveway. Our recycling trucks will go down there. Our leaf trucks will go down there as well and collect. But generally, private roads are maintained by the homeowners that live along those roads. Our tax collector is Chris Lobsher. She's been serving since 2018, and she's an elected official. She serves a 4-year term. Chris has done a great job here. She's changed some of the practices recently and has saved some money for the township. We do work with her, but so she has an office here in the township building, but she's actually technically a separate office from us. Sometimes people will call us here at the township and say, hey, can you tell me if I paid my taxes? We can't. We don't have that access. Only Chris, as the tax collector, has that ability. She's the only one that can certify that taxes have been paid. And then for people that have been delinquent on their taxes for whatever reason, they go to Portnoff Associates. They are a legal firm who provides the delinquent collections, and they work with the property owners, oftentimes to set up payment plans. They're not banging down your door, threatening to break your legs for not paying your taxes. They do want to work with you, because everybody has challenging circumstances at times. So Portnoff has been great, and they work with us, and then they feed the revenue through to us after they take out a portion for their fees, of course. And then the last thing I'm going to cover is ways to get involved. We have a number of committees in the township. We have a few that aren't as active. So we have our Civil Service Commission. The main job for the Civil Service Commission is when we're hiring for new police officers. They're the ones that review the candidates and interview them. Our Environmental Advisory Committee has been very active lately. It's been kind of brought back to life in the past year. So that's great to see. They review environmental practices in the community, new policies, electrical use, things of that sort. We have our Historical Commission that has not been super active lately, but they're generally the ones looking at the history of the township, and they might look at historical sites, things of that sort. We have our Parks Commission, and another very active commission that we have within the township. Ralph Graves knows that well. She's on our Parks Commission. We have our Planning Commission, which I talked about. Our Recycling Task Force is not active right now. It could come back to life at some point if our Board of Commissioners desires that they want to do that. Our Shade Tree Commission is another active one. As mentioned with Lisa here, they review development. They look at things. Just recently, they put a grant in to purchase bare root trees for one of our parks. So they look at a variety of things, and if you have any detailed questions about that, I'm sure Lisa would be able to answer those for you. We have our Sidewalk Committee. They look at safety in the area. It's kind of like a traffic calming committee. And then some of the two of these committees, the Sustainable Committee and the Summit School Committee, they're not active right now, but they were in place when the township was looking at practices that, like what to do with the Summit School, for example. And then I discussed our zoning hearing board before. And then I saw we had some questions here in the chat, but here's my contact information. I'm going to end the slideshow here. And all right, so some of the questions that I saw here. So how does the county criminal justice system interact with the township? That's a very good question, and something that our police department, our police chief, would probably be able to tell you more. Our police chief works with them, so if there's a case that our police have been involved with, our police are going to go to court. They're going to be a part of those court hearings. They'll provide their testimony on whatever's happening. Beyond that, I'm not exactly sure what happens. I know that from there we then get our revenue if there's a fine that's associated with that. And I could certainly put you in touch with Chief David Splain. Chief Splain is phenomenal. He does an excellent job for the Township Police Department. He's been here for about 7 years. He may also be an interesting person to speak to the League of Women Voters. If you haven't had him as a guest before, Chief would be great for that. And then from Ralph, is Nether Providence going to hire someone for your previous position? Not right now. We do have a part-time person that has joined on with us. Her name is Mona Price. Mona has been very capable. She's been taking a number of things off my plate. This year was a difficult budget year. We've got some grants projects that were going on. With our grants projects, there's usually a match that's associated with it, which can be in the range of 20 to 30%, meaning the township would have to pay 20 to 30% of the cost of the project. So that's something that can be expensive for the township. So as I kind of stepped into the role as township manager, we looked to hire a part-time person to kind of fill some of the things that I was doing. But then I've sort of just taken on the responsibilities of the assistant manager and the township manager. So I'm getting by so far. I'm not dying over here. So, and it's a fun challenge anyway. Let's see, and then Gloria, rotting and sick tree issues exist in MP along public roads as well as on private properties. How do you address tree issues along private property that threaten vehicles and walkers? Sure. So we do have code that requires they're for hazard trees. So if a tree is spotted in an area that appears to be dangerous, that can be brought to our attention, and our code enforcement officer will notify the homeowner. Usually it sends them a letter and says, it's been brought to our attention that this tree is dangerous. It needs to be either trimmed or cut down, whatever the appropriate remedy is, and he'll give them a certain amount of time to do that. You usually get 1 or 2 warnings, and then if it's disregarded, you can be cited. And every so often people will challenge it and say, that tree's not dead, that doesn't need to come down. We do have a township arborist that we contract with, and we may have the arborist come and take a look at it and confirm, like, yes, that tree does need to come down, or no, it looks like it just needs to be pruned a little bit. It can still be saved. Hopefully that answers your question there, Gloria. And then Nora, I loved your comment about your name. I thought it was funny that we have a Nora and a Jane on here. All we need is a Claire, and then all 3 of my daughters would be represented. So we love the names. We feel like they were kind of good, classic, strong names. So we're excited. Although our Nora spells her name with an H at the end, and that was because my wife's grandmother, her name was Nora, and she spelled it with an H. So that's why we opted to continue that tradition. So any other questions that maybe weren't in the chat that you might want me to discuss?
There was one that was asked earlier, and as usual, my internet did kick out in the middle. So if you've already answered this, please stop me. Are there any long-term plans for developing more business in the land that's available, or things within the township?
Not right now, not currently. I think there's a number of people in the community that would like to see. You were talking about like more commercial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Way of increasing taxes, tax revenues, I think is what.
Yeah, certainly. Not at the moment, because Nether Providence is so heavily residentially zoned, that would require some changes in zoning. There isn't a great deal of open space that's left within Nether Providence. The open space that's out there is already parks or preserved area. So that kind of limits it off the bat. And then, when you're rezoning an area, you want to make sure that it's contiguous. So for example, if the township building here is actually in a residentially zoned area, if, the township building ceased to exist, just hypothetically here, it would probably have to remain as a residentially zoned area. It wouldn't really make sense to rezone just this particular tract of land in a whole residentially zoned community. That could be considered spot zoning, and spot zoning is something that's actually illegal through the state. So we've heard a lot of people say it'd be great to have more commercial development and kind of increase that tax base, like you were saying. But I think the opportunities for it are just kind of slim here.
And Gloria, I think, added one here at the bottom under chat. If you look at that about revenue, this was actually Gloria's question originally. So
yeah, sure. Let's see. How can we reduce the tax burden without? So we want to reduce our taxes. That's a good question. It's a very good question, and it's a really hard one to answer. Because there's some things that could be done. So for example, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation, an earned income tax is an idea. It's something our Board of Commissioners had discussed a couple of years ago. I think the advantage of an earned income tax is that it could reduce your property taxes. And so anybody that's working in Nether Providence or lives in Nether Providence would have to pay the earned income tax. And I think our board had thought about, when they were exploring the idea, if they did earned income taxes, they would then try to reduce the property taxes so that the township's tax revenue would generally stay the same, but it would just be more in earned income taxes. So the people that are making a lot of money that maybe aren't even township residents, they're just coming in and working in the area, or the ones that just make high salaries, they can go towards paying more than, say, somebody that's on a fixed income, where the property taxes can be a little bit higher. Now, certainly that's something that, may only affect the township property taxes. It wouldn't necessarily change the real estate or the school district taxes, because the school district taxes are, of course, the largest portion of your property taxes. They make up about 80% of your taxes. The township and the county make up about 10% each. So that's an idea. There's other types of fees and things that can be put into place. People have floated the idea of a fire tax, but that's a little bit of to me, it's just kind of changing how you're looking at the tax. Some people might say, oh, it's only a fee, but yes, but it's still money coming out of your pocket. So I think, without the option of a lot of commercial development that can take place, I think you kind of have to get creative and think about different ways of bringing in revenue. Other ideas, you could start cutting services, and that's generally not something that people are very happy about. If you start getting rid of police departments or a portion of the police department or the public works department, then your services might suffer a little bit. So, it's kind of the counter argument to that.
I think the last question that I think you and I talked about at one point, Dave, was whether or not whether we really do need to have an emergency preparedness plan sort of in place for not only COVID, but for things like if there's a big accident on the Blue Route and there's a chemical spill, or there's whatever it might be where there had to be evacuations and things like that. And I just didn't know if this has been something that's been talked about at all. I know there was a plan right after 9/11, because I know I talked with Gary Cummings Bennett then with another league member as well, but I just didn't know if anything had happened since then.
Certainly. So there is that's one of the things we've worked with the county on. So we have an emergency management coordinator who is also the fire chief of Garden City Fire Company. We do have a plan in place here. It's probably something that should be updated, but we've also worked with the county, and they have a hazard mitigation plan as well. And that's something we have here on file at the township to address, those types of things. Here's what you would do in this particular situation. So I do have to look and see. I think chemical spills are one of those things. But that's something I'd have to double check on. It's been a while since
we're about to have probably have liquid natural gas coming down the Blue Route to go over the bridge to go to New Jersey to Gibbstown. And this is going to be one of the major ways. Well, when you start moving large amounts of natural gas down roads, you have to have a certain amount of concern. The Blue Route sort of goes right through us.
Sure.
That was it. But no, I want to thank you so much for you've given us a huge amount of information to digest and to think about. And if it's all right with you, we will put it online so other people who couldn't be there can hear it, as well as anybody else in the town who wants to hear it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nancy actually just sent me a message for one other question, which I may try and answer real quick.
Sure.
And the question was, why did the township initiate the sidewalk projects? So back in 2008, we had our Walkable Wallingford Committee that was created, and they had addressed a number of areas where they felt safety for pedestrians was challenging. So they created a priority of areas in the township that should get new sidewalks. And so the township has kind of been going through and following that list one by one and figuring out where to do it. Some of the higher priorities were Copples Lane and Wallingford Avenue. Those have been done. Same thing with Moore Road. East Rose Valley was on there, and Providence Road. We're actually getting ready to do some sidewalk improvements on Providence Road in between East Rose Valley and Copples Lane. And the overall thing is to increase walkability, just to connect the community, to make it safer for people to get around, keep people active, and just try and reduce pedestrian incidents. Knock on wood, we haven't had many in the township. We'd like to keep it that way.
Great.
I asked that question, Dave, because I was curious to know if you were required to put those in or if it was initiated by the township itself.
It was initiated by the Board of Commissioners, and a lot of times it's with funding from the state or the federal government, because they agree that the project may be needed.
I highly approve, by the way.
Oh, good.
Well,
Good.
I'd like to put in a pitch for further up on Providence Road, where trying to walk along that is, as an adult, is particularly difficult. I'm amazed the kids can do it to and from school because it is one giant bump, but I gather you have pipes underneath it. So is that something that makes it very difficult to do?
It's really just the cost of it. It's hard to believe how much a sidewalk can cost. Before I worked in local government, I wouldn't have thought a sidewalk would be very expensive. But they, like just some concrete, like why is it so hard? People pour concrete all the time. But once you get into all the engineering that's required with it and all the stormwater management considerations, it can be very expensive. So just to give you an idea, the sidewalk on Moore Road, which I think was about 0.6 of a mile, cost about $1.1 million, $1.3 million. And that was all paid through the state. And there's a lot of benefits for that, connecting the neighborhoods to the schools and the swim clubs, for example. But it's expensive. It'd be very expensive. And the goal on Providence Road is to connect it basically from just at Plush Mill Road, I think where the sidewalk, where the good sidewalk stops, and get it all the way down to Chester Road. So that's the long-term idea. So we've been trying to seek funding for that, and we got enough funding just for the area from Copples to Providence. We've applied for more funding, so we're hoping to stretch that even further.
Well, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, I'll let Dave go and have lunch.
No, just Dave, just a note that I approve of the sidewalks, even though I never use them. I'm a non-walker.
That's okay. Well, thank you. I'm happy, and our board will be happy to hear that. So
I'd just like to add to Gloria's comment that I think Nether Providence is lucky to have one with your breadth of experience.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. I'm still getting my feet wet here. I've got a lot to learn, and I'm looking forward to hopefully being here for a long time and learning a lot. And it's a great community. I love it, and I love the things that are happening and the people here. So it means a lot to hear that from you. So thank you.
Thank you.
So, and thank you all for having me here. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for ideas for future meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.